Okay. Good evening, one and all. We'd like to welcome you to the special meeting of the Bethlehem Zoning Hearing Board. My name is Jim Shantz. I'm the acting chairman for this meeting. Others serving with me tonight from my left are Terry Novotny and attorney Linda Shea Gardner. Our solicitor for tonight is Eric Schock. Our zoning officer is Craig Pfeiffer, and our court stenographer is Jean Genova. Since there is only one hearing tonight, and I'd just like to say that we are in the sixth night of this hearing, and so far we're about 18 hours and 98 gadfly posts into the hearing. So it's a very special night. Everybody, I think, knows what they're doing by now with regard to the hearing. We are live stream, I think, for the one person that may be watching it out there, whoever you are. Good luck. I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to turn it over to Attorney Stevens to pick up the cross-examination of Mr. Bonnick, and but I will turn it over to Attorney Schock first in case he has anything to add.
Did you complete your cross?
I didn't. I'm just starting.
Yeah, so we didn't start it, correct? Yeah, that's what I'm sorry. You didn't start it all. That's what I had. We're at the end. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I misspoke. Thank you.
You're still under oath.
Yeah.
Oh, do we need to?
He's still under oath. I mean, unless you want to re-swear them, it's up to you.
No, that's fine. I think everybody else, is there anybody that may be speaking tonight that hasn't been sworn at least once before? I turn it over to you, Attorney Stevens.
May it please the board. Good evening, Mr. Bannock. I have a number of follow-up questions based upon your testimony in the prior evening. As you're aware, this matter with 2S Market Street has been ongoing for quite a long period of time, and I want to get a better understanding of your tenure when you first became engaged in this particular case. Can you tell me when you first became involved as an expert engineer for 2S Market Street?
2013.
And what was the nature of your engagement? And what I mean by that is who engaged you and what were the circumstances?
I was engaged by Brocklin DeVito as an expert witness in consideration of uses on that property.
So were you engaged ultimately by the property owner? Would that be Morningstar Partners?
I was engaged by Brocklin DeVito.
Okay. And you were testifying on behalf of their client, Morningstar Partners, the owner of the property. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
In the prior evening, the hearing just prior to tonight, you were presented by the solicitor for the city of Bethlehem. Were you also engaged by the city of Bethlehem to provide testimony in this matter?
I have not been, no.
What is your relationship with the city of Bethlehem, since Attorney Deshler was the one answering the questions?
He is co-counsel on this case. So I'm not under contract to the city of Bethlehem at this point.
Okay, that was my next. Has the city of Bethlehem paid you any money for your testimony at any point in time for the duration from 2013 to the present?
They have not.
So the sole payer for your services has been through Brocklin DeVito for their client. Is that correct?
Yes.
What has been your hourly rate that you've charged since 2013 to the present for your services?
I don't know, just sitting here right now. I don't know.
Okay. Can you give me a reasonable estimate? Is it $200, $300, $400 an hour? Can you give me a reasonable estimate?
That's about 175 per hour.
Okay. And can you give me an estimate from 2013 up to the present time, the number of hours that you've expended with respect to 2S Market Street?
I cannot.
Could you give me a reasonable estimate of those hours?
I cannot, no.
If you can break it down further with respect to your tenure from 2016, where you testified in the variance hearing from 2016 to the present, could you give us an estimate of time of the number of hours that you spent on 2S Market Street?
I cannot.
With respect to the zoning amendment, so now we're into 2019 to the present, can you give us an estimate of the amount of time that you've expended on this?
I cannot.
Can you give me a ballpark of the hours in 2019 that you've spent on 2 West Market Street? And what I'm looking for is, has it been 10 hours? Has it been 20 hours, 50 hours? Just a reasonable estimate. It doesn't have to be exact to the,
It's been more than 10 hours.
okay. Has it been more than 50 hours?
I don't know.
And you've testified that for the duration of the zoning amendment matters, you've attended the various hearings on behalf of the property owners, like, or Brockholm DeVito, is that correct?
I have been in attendance at all of the recent hearings,
Okay, when you say
ones that you've been involved in.
so that would include the Planning Commission meeting on November 8th of 2019, is that correct? 2018, excuse me.
No, I've been in attendance at the hearings that you've been involved in front of this board as part of this recent matter.
Okay. Were you,
I was not at the Planning Commission meeting back in November of 2018.
and were you at any of the votes? That would be the
I
December,
was not.
let me finish, just we have it on the record, the December, I believe it's December 4th, December 18th votes. Were you at either of those?
I was not.
proceedings? We got the actual hearing for the zoning amendment, which I believe was November 18 of 2018.
I was not.
It is true, though, that you did provide sworn testimony with respect to 2 West Market Street at the variance hearing, which was April 27 of 2016, correct?
I did not.
You did not provide any sworn testimony at the April 27, 2016 variance hearing.
That's correct.
Do you recall providing any sworn testimony at a variance hearing for 2 West Market Street?
I did not.
I want you to flip to, if you could pull exhibit. It's been marked as exhibit 24. May I approach the witness? Formally presented to the board transcript of April 27, 2016 before this zoning hearing board. Reference to that refresh your recollection. That's hearing for 2 West Market Street.
It does, yes.
Now your recollection.
You have to be at the microphone.
So now after reviewing that transcript, it does refresh your recollection that you did in fact provide testimony before this same zoning hearing board with respect to the same subject property, the 2 West Market Street property, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my.
All yours. All yours.
And I assume you charged through the Brockholm DeVito firm your hourly fee for your services to prepare for and provide testimony at the April 27, 2016 hearing, correct?
Yes.
With respect to your earlier testimony on direct examination, you made some references to various provisions in the Bethlehem zoning ordinance. Do you recall that testimony?
The recent testimony?
Yes.
The last hearing?
Yes.
I do, yes.
Right, and you'll agree with me that the subject amendment that you have been brought here to testify about applies to two districts within the city of Bethlehem. That's the RT High Density Residential District and the RG Medium Density Residential District, correct?
Yes,
And you'll agree with me that in accord with the Bethlehem zoning ordinance, particularly 1303.07, there's a definition of the purpose of those two particular districts, correct? Just so,
I'm not sure what's in 13.
are you looking at the Bethlehem zoning ordinance?
I am,
Just
yes.
so, okay, just so the record's clear, so you have now in front of you, Mr. Bannock, a copy of the Bethlehem zoning ordinance.
I do, yes.
If you could turn to 1303.07 for a moment.
Okay. 1303.07?
0.07.
Okay.
And it should be entitled Purposes of Each District. Are you with me?
I'm here, yep.
With respect to subsection D, RG Medium Density Residential District, you will agree with me that the purpose is to provide for medium high density neighborhoods with a mix of housing types, correct?
Yes,
Okay. It doesn't say anything in there about mixed use or commercial use, does it?
does not.
With respect to subsection E, RT High Density Residential District, the definition says to provide for higher density residential neighborhoods with a mix of housing types, correct?
Yes,
And it doesn't say anything about a mix of commercial uses, correct?
yes.
Correct. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
And with respect to the zoning ordinance, Mr. Bonnick, isn't it true that the zoning ordinance just recently, fairly recently in 2012 in the city of Bethlehem went through a process of revising, and there was community input with respect to the various provisions of the zoning ordinance, correct?
Yes,
And you would agree with me, Mr. Bonnick, that the amendment 1304.04B was not a part of that 2012 revision of the Bethlehem zoning ordinance, correct?
I don't know.
You'll agree with me that this particular amendment was petitioned for the property owner itself, correct?
Yes,
It was not a petition that was filed by the city of Bethlehem, correct?
yes.
With respect to your earlier testimony, following, you had a fair amount of testimony on Exhibit C15, which was the map. The
Which
overhead
map is that?
The overhead map, I think it's sitting right in front of you. If you just pull that out, if you need another copy of it, you have it.
This map?
C15, yes.
Mine's not labeled C15, so I don't know which one you're referring to, but I do have
Well,
a map that
If you want, we
might be C15. That's it. We got it.
You're remembering now, you had a fair amount of testimony in the prior hearing with respect to C15, correct?
Yes,
And with respect to the particular block where 2 West Market Street is located, you will agree with me that there are properties that have non-conforming uses. And I think your testimony reflected that, correct? And one of those properties is the Brockle DeVito law firm.
yes,
Okay. And we all under non-conforming use, something that was in existence, but prior to the zoning code, so that use is allowed to continue. Is
yes,
that correct? Okay.
yes,
Another example was the Littner Law Office. It was a law office, a commercial use, non-conforming, and it's been allowed to continue, correct?
yes,
But under the current zoning code, both the Brockle office and the Littner office are not permitted, correct?
yes.
Answer the question. He answered the question. They're not permitted uses.
We're still there. I mean, we have to use, let's use the terminology correctly. I mean,
Well,
I think it's understood what is meant.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you meant, are they permitted by right on the property? Is that the question you were answering, Mr. Bonnet?
Once again,
I'm saying when he said permitted, I assumed he meant, are they permitted by right under the zoning ordinance? And you said, no, they're not, right?
that's correct. Yes.
Okay. It wasn't, are they allowed to be there?
Yes.
That would be a different
Yes.
question.
Right.
Okay.
And you testified with respect to the Bethlehem zoning code, and you said, it's something that you use regularly as an engineer, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
In particular, there's a provision in the Bethlehem zoning hearing code 1323 that deals with non-conforming uses. Are you familiar with that section of the Bethlehem zoning code?
I am. Yes.
Okay. And you'll agree with me that part of the provisions with respect to 1323 is to provide a gradual remedy for incompatibilities resulting from such non-conforming uses. Correct? If you want to pull, you have the zoning.
Is there a specific
Ordinance.
section of that ordinance you want to refer to?
We can go through it, so I can point it out to you specifically, but if you want to turn to section 1323.
Okay.
In the first section, 1323.01, it defines the purposes, and it talks about uses that are intended to provide a gradual remedy for the incompatibilities resulting from such non-conforming uses. Do you see that language?
I do see that. Yes.
Okay. So, in short, what the intention behind this zoning ordinance is, where possible, there's an attempt to convert non-conforming uses into conforming uses in whatever district you're in, correct?
Well, it's a gradual remedy for the incompatibilities resulting from such non-conforming uses.
Okay.
And this goes on to define different processes that could be applied to non-conforming uses.
And underlying those processes is an effort, underlying this provision of the zoning code, to take non-conformities and convert those incompatibilities or non-conformities into conforming uses within the respective districts in the city of Bethlehem, correct?
No.
Now, with respect to the map that you referred to, you'll agree with me that there were a number of instances of properties that went from non-conforming uses to conforming uses. But I don't think you pointed them out. So why don't we walk through that? And in particular, I think you had earlier testimony about the Dodson building. You had mentioned that the Dodson building was an apartment complex. But you'll agree with me that in just the past number of years, the Dodson building had a non-conforming use as a business office, correct? There were commercial offices in there.
You just asked me about 3 questions. So
You'll agree with me, sir,
go ahead.
that the Dodson building previously had non-conforming commercial offices in it, correct?
Yes.
And in fairly recent time, the past number of years, that those non-conforming uses have been converted into a residential property, correct?
That's correct. There was a decision made by the owner of that office complex, which was in poor repair, to market that property for development. And as part of that development consideration, a proposal was put forward by a development team to request that the city convert that existing office building into a residential complex. They went through a process to change that use. I don't know what that process was, but that was a decision made by the landowner and the potential buyer to change the use of that property. That was a voluntary choice by the applicant.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that,
And
and
Let him
that,
finish.
and that choice was then presented to the city of Bethlehem for consideration.
Right. And that choice is consistent with what we just went over in section 1323, because you're taking a non-conforming, an incompatibility, and turning it into a conforming use, correct?
No. That was a choice by a landowner to propose a change in use of that property.
It was a choice. It was a choice that adheres to the underlying principle of 1323, which is to take an incompatible use, in that case, a business office use, and to gradually, in that case, turn it into what is now a conforming use in the RT residential district, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Yeah, it was just a shorter version. It was the same question. Go to your next one.
Well, I mean, he did, if he can answer it.
Well, no, there was an objection that he's already answered that. I heard him answer that. It was just a shorter version of that same question.
Yeah.
You agree? I
Okay.
thought it was. Okay.
Okay. Just going back to your map,
Okay.
you'll agree with me that at 10 West Market Street, there was a non-conforming use in that property. And if direct your attention to the property, it's directly adjacent to 2 West Market Street. If you're looking at the 2 West Market Street, the residential single-family dwelling, the property immediately to the left. Are you with me as far as what 10 West Market Street is?
Yes, it's the red brick apartment building.
Right. It's now an apartment building, correct? But within a few years prior, there was a non-conforming law office use in that property, correct?
I have no idea.
So you don't know one way or the other if there was a non-conforming law office use in that property that was converted over to a residential apartment use. You don't know one way or the other.
I have no idea.
Okay. With respect to 65 West Market Street, if you just continue down the block towards Main Street, go to the opposite side of the street. What's the corner? Heckwalder. If you're and go down to the corner of Heckwalder and West Market Street, that's 65 West Market Street. Are you with me as far as what property I'm referring to?
I see the property, yes.
Okay. Are you aware that that property had a non-conforming use, that there used to be a business architectural office, and then within the past 10 years, that property was converted to 100% residential? Were you aware of that?
I was not.
Why don't we move in the other direction on your map and go to East Market Street and go into the next block, go past the Episcopal Church, and immediately on the same side of the street, that's 48 East Market Street. Are you familiar with the Tudor stone property located there?
It's off the map.
Okay, so your map didn't include that. So you said your office has been in this neighborhood for quite some time. You're familiar with that block of East Market Street, correct?
Well, my office has been in the city of Bethlehem for more than 20 years.
So is it a yes or no? Are you familiar with that block of East Market Street, the block between New and Center?
The block, I know, yes.
Okay.
Individual properties, I may not know prior uses of individual properties,
Okay.
possible.
The property 48 East Market directly adjacent to the Episcopal Church, or were you aware that that used to be a dentist office, a non-conforming use that was converted to 100% residential?
Objection to the form. It's a compound question. In addition, it assumes facts, not an evidence. Counsel can lead the witness, but we can't have questions like, are you aware that this property was used this way? And then, offer some testimony on that. You should say, was this property used for this purpose? Is it true that this property was used for this purpose? I don't think the record should assume that Mr. Stevens' assertions are correct, and then Mr. Bonnet just gets to say, well, I was aware of
No,
this.
that's completely untrue, because there is a record on this particular property. We had the property owner, Mr. Frank Mayberry, testify in this hearing, and it's my understanding that Mr. Bonnick attended these hearings and presumably listened to that testimony that 48 Market Street used to have a dentist's office and was converted to 100% residential. So I think I'm entitled to explore his recollection of that and whether that entered into his analysis of what he's testified.
Identified it as a business previously. It's just that something had been there. And he
Well, the guy,
converted to it.
didn't the guy say? that it's off?
I don't
think
remember
Alan
that.
did.
Right, well, then I-
Biased.
Yeah, I don't remember
Huh?
testifying.
I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
In all candor, I don't recall if he testified to that or not. I mean, I know he was called. I mean, I guess,
He most certainly did.
well, I just don't remember it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. So if we want to take a half hour, I can look through my 38 pages of notes maybe. But can you just ask the question of does he recall if it was a dentist's office? I mean, I guess my point is this. If you are correct that he testified that it was a dental office, that will be reflected in the record, correct? If he doesn't know if it was or not, what's he going to say? I'm not sure where it's going.
Well, it's cross-examination. I think I'm entitled to explore that and
Sure,
explore to what extent he's looked at this issue of
Sure,
conversion of
but-
properties and how this particular amendment negatively impacts that.
I get that, but what
So-
I'm asking you is if he says he doesn't recall that it was a dental office, where else can we
I
go?
don't think we even got that far with the
Okay,
question.
right. I mean, just ask that question. If he doesn't recall it, what I'm saying is I'll accept your truth that the record will reflect that it was a dental office, correct? Do we need to know that fact for you to ask this question, whether the record reflects it?
Well,
Do you understand what I'm saying? You're saying, yes, but Mr. Mayberry testified. None of us recall whether he did. I'm sure you are correct that that reflects that, but does that matter for the purpose of this question if he doesn't know if
that may be a follow-up question.
all right, well, ask him the question.
I think that if he doesn't,
Because then I'll take the time to
Right.
look to, in fact, see if my notes reflect that your witness said what you said.
do you have a recollection of, or do you have any knowledge whatsoever that the property 48 East Market, directly adjacent to the Episcopal Church, at one time was a dental office that was then converted to 100% residential use?
No.
Okay. You testified earlier that you appeared at all the different hearings for the amendment. Do you have a recollection of attending the hearing where the owner of that particular property testified and indicated that he, in particular, was the property owner who made the conversion from the dental office, a non-conforming use, and converted it to a residential property because that's what the city wanted, and they were encouraging that type of conversion to a permitted use? Do you remember that testimony?
Objection to the form. I'm losing track of these questions. These are totally compound questions. Just ask simple leading questions. All we have to do here. And he already testified that he wasn't at all these hearings.
That he testified that he was here for the recent hearings on the amendment. Let's clarify that. You testified earlier that you were at all the recent hearings involving the amendment that I was at.
Yes.
Okay. That would be one of the hearings. I was there, and we were specifically addressing this subject amendment. So my question is, do you have any recollection of any such testimony?
No.
Yeah.
Now, with respect to your map, the fact that these various properties deconverted, went from a non-conforming use to a conforming use, that's not something that you took into consideration when you presented this map, is that correct?
Well, the map provides for uses of selected properties that I had personal knowledge of. We also went beyond that to describe individual properties between New Street and the end of the RT zoning district on the same side of the block as 2 West Market.
What I'm trying to get,
I did not describe every single property on that block, nor did I go down East Market beyond what this map actually shows, which is the school and the properties that are listed on the map.
right. I mean, and this map shows a very narrowed view of the surrounding properties to 2 West Market Street, correct?
Not in my opinion, no.
Well, you didn't show the 48 East Market Street that I just referred to. That's down the block in East Market Street, correct?
It's off the map.
And the next block going into the 200 block of East Market Street is off the map, correct?
Yes,
And in fact, your map shows a small portion of the complete expanse of the RT district, correct?
yes,
And your map does not show at all the RG district, correct?
yes.
And your map does not reflect, from your testimony, any information about the deconversion of non-conforming uses to conforming uses, correct?
Nor does it reflect conversions that may have happened in the opposite direction.
Right, it's something that you just didn't look into, correct?
It's not on the map.
No, my question is, it's not something you looked into, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So to the extent that the amendment, section 1304.04B, may negatively impact this trend of deconverting properties from non-conforming uses to conforming uses, that's just not something that's you're here to testify about, correct?
I'm going to object to the question. It's not. there's been
This
no-
is cross-examination.
Well, except,
Still rules.
well,
It's not. it's
Wait a
not-
No, well,
minute,
Hold on.
Wait a minute.
one at a time. What's the basis of the objection?
He's announced a trend of
Okay.
deconversions. There is no trend of
Yeah.
deconversions. This board knows that the West Market Financial Services, which is just 2 doors down from this, was put in converting a home to guess what? A financial services. Are we going to go down this rabbit hole?
Rephrase the question, because I agree. I don't understand why you should characterize it as a trend. You're saying there were deconversions,
Take the word trend out of it.
right? Exactly.
Same question, but I'm taking
Go ahead.
the word trend out of it. So
But
you're
restate it.
you're not giving any analysis either in your map or here. You're not here to testify with respect to any deconversions that have occurred from non-conforming uses to conforming uses that may be negatively impacted by the zoning ordinance, correct?
The map and my testimony talked about existing land uses.
Okay.
Right.
Did not speak to conversions in either direction.
Mhm. I mean, you'll agree with me that with respect to the Dodson building, there was no variance that was needed to convert from the business office use to a conforming use, correct?
I don't know.
And you'll agree with me that there was no need for an amendment or a new ordinance to convert from a non-conforming use, a business office use, to a residential use for the Dodson building.
I don't know.
Um, so if you could turn to Exhibit 7 in the notebook, if you could just turn to Exhibit 7.
I don't know what that is.
If you go to the notebook, there are pre-marked exhibits of the appellant. I'm asking you to turn to Exhibit 7.
You have it, correct? Yeah. We have 7. Just- The zoning officer will bring you Exhibit 7.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Mr. Bannock, I'm just going to ask you to look at Exhibit 7, and it's going to be in conjunction with the map that you provided to the zoning hearing board, C15. And as far as C15, it only goes, partially, a small, just 2 houses essentially into East Market. Are you following along?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have any reason to dispute that if you had included the complete block, the rest of East Market Street, that there are at least 9 residential properties and 2 churches that are all permitted uses for the remainder of the block that you didn't include in C15?
I have no idea the land uses on those properties.
So you have no basis to dispute whether or not there are 9 residential properties and 2 churches that are all permitted uses.
I have no knowledge of individual land uses on those properties.
And going down New Street, you didn't include the residential properties except, let me see. You include the Bethel Inn, but then there's numerous residential properties as you go down towards where we are right now, towards City Hall. They're all residential properties except the corner store, which is part of the corner store provision, 1304.04A. Right? The rest are all residential. Would you agree with me?
I don't know.
Okay, so you just don't know one way or the other.
That's correct.
And you didn't include those other properties, whether they're residential or whatever use, in your map, correct?
Yes.
Now, with respect to, since we were just talked about the corner store, you're aware of the property that's right here at the corner of Church and New, the corner store, Sam Goodman's property.
Yes.
And you're aware that in this case, there's a provision 1304.04A, which is a provision that's for the reuse of corner stores. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And are you aware that in the petition that was filed by, why don't we do it this way? If you could turn to Exhibit 16 of appellant's exhibits. And if you could turn to Exhibit A. Well, let's first start with. Okay. Second page of the petition, paragraph 16. Isn't it true that it reads the proposed amendment closely follows the existing text of ZO section 1304.04, thereby incorporating the rationale of the existing section 1304.04, correct?
Yes.
And you said you sat through the various hearings, the immediate hearings that involve me with respect to the zoning amendment. You remember Darlene Heller providing evidence that that particular provision was intended to allow flexibility for the reuse of corner buildings originally built as storefronts. Do you recall any of that?
Yes, I do.
And a further provision of 1304.04A is that the business space shall have been occupied at one time by a principal lawful business use, correct?
Yes,
And you'll agree with me that 1304.04B does not have the same provision where the single-family dwelling had a prior business use, correct?
yes,
That's correct. Right. And you'll agree with me that the commercial office use has to go into the single-family dwelling, correct?
yes,
And 1304.04B has a provision of requiring some sort of commercial retail use, correct?
correct, yes.
And there's nothing in this amendment that would allow the business office use to be where the commercial or retail use is, correct?
Correct,
The business office use has to go into that single-family home, correct? Single-family dwelling, to be exact.
correct.
Let's take a look at the study that you did. The zoning text amendment petition for Morningstar Partners LLC. Your list of 8 properties. And just so the record's clear, gentlemen, do we have your exhibit number for that? I just want to make sure we're referring to the
That was City 1.
city exhibit 1 is the list of 8 properties. So you have that in front of you, C1?
yes.
Okay. So as I understand your testimony, you were the primary researcher and author of C1, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And after submitting C1 for purposes of the zoning amendment, it's my understanding of your testimony that you just gave in the earlier hearing that you didn't do any further research or study of potential properties that would fall under 1304.04B. Is that accurate?
not sure I follow your question.
Okay. It's my understanding that this is all you did, basically, as far as researching what properties fell under 1304.04B. You didn't go beyond that and do further research on that issue, correct?
There were other properties that were looked at beyond this list of 8.
Maybe you looked at other properties to compile your list of 8, is that correct?
No, there were other properties that were looked at by our office beyond the list of 8
Okay.
after this list was prepared.
After it was prepared,
Yes.
tell me what happened there?
Well, there were various exhibits that were provided by your firm, which provided different lists of housing stock and conversions that were done, and we looked at those lists as well.
Okay, that I don't recall you testifying to that. I thought I understood your testimony that once you submitted the list of 8 properties, that your job essentially ended there, but is that not correct?
It's not correct.
Okay. So as far as looking at the other exhibits that were submitted in this case, did you prepare any other document or anything responding to that?
We reviewed the lists that were prepared by others.
And by the way, you testified at the prior hearing. Since the prior hearing, did you have any conversations with either Mr. Preston or Mr. Deschler with respect to any of your testimony or any of the issues here?
Did not.
Now, if you could turn to your C1 and turn to tab 3 of that exhibit.
Okay.
You'll agree with me that that particular property in Exhibit 3 is the architectural characteristics of a storefront, correct?
Yes.
So it has the architectural characteristics of the storefront. It's got the angled front door, and it's a property that's at the corner of two streets, correct?
Yes,
Um, Now, isn't it true that that would meet the criteria of 1304.04A, the corner store provision?
it may.
And if you could turn to Exhibit 5. Okay. There's a property there, and are you with me on Exhibit tab 5 of C1? Are you with me?
I am, yes.
Okay. You'll agree with me that that's a property that's at the corner of two streets, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay. It has the angle. It looks like it was retrofitted, but was formerly once a corner store. Will you agree with me on that?
I have no idea.
So you're looking at that picture and you can't tell one way or the other if at some point in the history of this building as to whether or not it was a corner store.
That's correct, yes.
As part of your analysis, did you in any way take into consideration that this property may be better suited as a property for 1304.04A as opposed to one that would fall or be eligible for 1304.04B?
We did not.
And if you could turn to tab 7. Just tell me when you're there.
Yes,
If you looked at the photographs that are depicted for tab 7 of C1,
yes,
you'll agree with me that that's a property that is at the corner of two streets.
yes,
And you will agree with me that that has the architectural characteristics of a storefront, correct?
yes.
And as part of your analysis, did you make any analysis as to whether or not this would be more appropriately to meet the criteria of 1304.04A as opposed to the amendment, 1304.04B?
The analysis that we did was not relative to 13.04A, only to B.
And you mentioned that you looked at other evidence that was more submitted in this case. And if you could turn to Exhibit 23 of appellant's exhibits.
Yes,
And on the first page, page 1 of 3 of Exhibit 23, it indicates the property 702 East 6th Street. Isn't what they're saying? It does not qualify for a 1404.04B eligibility because it's a multifamily. It's not a single family dwelling.
yes,
And is that your finding as well, that it was a multifamily dwelling and therefore there was no single family dwelling at the property that will qualify it for 1404.04B?
it was my finding that there was not enough information that I had access to confirm the internal use of that building.
Okay, so you just put it on the list without investigating further whether or not it was a multifamily used property versus a single family residence, correct?
It was my finding that there was not enough information to evaluate the internal use of that building.
But my question, sir, is you didn't do a further investigation as to whether or not that property had a multifamily use in it versus a single family use, correct?
Referring to the time before my list was prepared or after that time?
Anytime.
Anytime. Okay. So the list that we prepared was based on available data that was given to us and available through public records. To ascertain the use of the inside of the building, I would have to make arrangements with the owner of that property and do a site inspection of the inside of the building and discuss with them the use that they had in place of that building, which we have not done for any of the properties that have been discussed this evening.
Okay. So you just made an assumption that there was a single-family dwelling on there without doing this further investigation, correct?
The list that we prepared was based on available public records.
Turning to the property 836 East Fifth Street. In this exhibit, it's indicating that that's a multifamily dwelling property and therefore does not meet criteria for 1304.04B. Essentially the same question. Did you do any further investigation and make a determination that in fact there was no single family dwelling at that particular parcel, that in fact there's a multifamily dwelling?
It's our opinion that we cannot ascertain the use of that building internally without going to the building, having a tour of the inside of the building, and discussing with the landowner how that property is being used. We have not conducted that tour.
And with respect to Exhibit 23, there's a further list there at page 2 of 3, indicating 9 additional properties that are eligible under 1304.04B. Did you see that?
Yes,
And as you sit here today, you have no reason to dispute that there are 9 additional properties that are eligible under 1304.04B. No reason to dispute either way, correct?
I have no idea.
Okay. And with respect to the memo of Paige Van Wert requesting data from the city, and that's Exhibit 46 of appellant's exhibits. Did you have an opportunity to review that, Mr. Bonnick?
I did, yes. Somewhere.
Well, I mean, just based on your understanding and your review of Exhibit 46, Dr. Wert's December 11, 2018 memo, is it your understanding that a request was made of the city to provide properties that either eligible or likely could be converted and be eligible under 1304.04B? Is that your basic understanding of the request?
Memo request a list of that would meet 3 categories. First would be a complete list of all properties and their locations in the RT and RG districts that currently include a non-conforming use. Does not clarify what that non-conforming use would need to be as far as it being commercial or retail. Second item is of that set of properties, those that include a residential component, single or multifamily, or apartment above the commercial component. Item 3 of this set, the subset that lie on a corner site. So it's my opinion that the request that was submitted by Dr. Van Wert goes well beyond the scope of the amendment that we're referring to this evening.
So as I understand your testimony, did you have an opportunity to review the list of properties that were produced by Darlene Heller, which is Exhibit 21? Did you have a chance to review that?
I did, yes.
So as you sit here today, you can't tell me one way or the other if there are 8 properties as you suggest, whether there's an additional 9 properties as suggested in Exhibit 23, or if it's per Darlene Heller's testimony that the properties encompassed by this amendment may be anywhere from 8 properties to 140 properties, correct? You can't tell me one way or the other.
Well, there's 2 responses to that. First is that, as I just stated, the list is prepared to meet certain criteria that go beyond the scope of the ordinance. So there are likely properties on this list that would not be impacted by the ordinance as written.
But you didn't study that list enough to tell me exactly which ones fall under 1304.04B or which ones do not, correct?
I looked at a select number of about 15 properties on that list, and I found that half of them do not meet the criteria of this ordinance amendment.
Okay, but the other half of the 15, 6 or 7, 8 of them did meet criteria, correct?
Yes,
So you looked at 15, 7 to 8 did meet criteria. We have your list of 8. We have the appellant's list of an additional 9. It's my understanding that the list is estimated that it was submitted by Darlene Heller may have up to 140 or more properties, correct? And you only looked at 15, correct?
you've asked me a number of questions in one sentence there. So one question, I will answer that question.
Darlene, Ms. Heller submitted a list of 140 properties. You only looked at 15. Half of those you said may meet eligibility, correct?
Yes,
So the remaining of those 120, 20, however number, 120 properties you didn't look at, correct?
yes, that's correct.
All right. And as Darlene Heller has testified to in this case, the end result of this amendment remains unclear. You heard that testimony, correct?
I don't recall that specific statement.
Do you recall reading any of Darlene Heller's memos that she submitted in this case where she indicated that the end result or the impact of the subject amendment remains unclear and uncertain?
No.
You don't remember reading any of those memos?
Not that statement, no.
Well, why don't we return to Darlene Heller's November 2nd, 2018 memo. I think that's Appellant's Exhibit 18 on the 3rd page. If you're with me in the summary. If you could drop down in the middle of the summary, it reads, therefore, the end result of the amendment is unclear. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And you're aware that this particular amendment went through the Bethlehem Planning Commission, correct?
Yes,
And one of the purposes of going through the Bethlehem Planning Commission is to make sure that the subject amendment comports with the comprehensive plan, correct?
I don't know what the function of the planning commission was as part of that consideration. I don't know.
So that's not something you looked into in preparing and providing testimony here today?
I don't know if the Bethlehem Planning Commission gave specific consideration to the performance or lack thereof of the amendment to the comprehensive plan. I don't know.
Do you have any idea if that's one of the main duties of the Bethlehem Planning Commission is when an amendment comes before them, that it's their responsibility to make a determination if a amendment that's before them comports or complies with the Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan?
That's part of consideration of an ordinance amendment. I don't know if the planning commission performed that service or not.
If this is more general though, do you know if that's what their aim or their goal is to make sure when an amendment comes before them, that's what they're supposed to do, to make sure it complies?
That would be a factor in their consideration, perhaps, yes.
Right. Okay, fair enough. You just don't know if they did it in this case. That's you. Now turning to the photographs. Move to those. You had a fair amount of testimony on photographs that were provided as exhibits by your counsel. And those are exhibits C4 through C14. I'm just gonna have a number of follow-up questions there. So you can turn your attention to those.
Okay.
So why don't we start with C14, the subject property at 2 West Market Street. Are you with me? Just let me know when to.
Yeah, the ones that I have are not labeled, so.
It's the 2 West Market Street is C14.
That's it.
And if you could turn to the second page, the green buildings. Are you with me? While
Yes,
you were here for Darlene Heller, and she testified on my cross-examination that the green buildings can be converted to residential. Did you hear that testimony?
what's that again?
That the green buildings can be converted to residential. Did you hear that testimony?
Don't recall that.
You'll agree with me as an engineer that the green buildings can be converted to residential, correct?
Not sure.
That as far as your training, your experience as an engineer, and this is strictly from an engineer perspective. I'm not asking you questions about ordinances or anything along those lines. Just from a simply an engineering construction aspect, can the green buildings be converted to residential?
Objection, asked and answered.
He said not sure. It was the same question.
I narrowed it because encompassed in my more general question was he may be saying, well, I'm not sure because there may be some ordinance, some regulation that prevents it. But
Why don't you say, why are you not sure?
because my question is more focused on take away any regulations. Just look at this from an engineering and construction perspective. Can the green buildings be converted to residential? That's all I'm asking.
Answer the question.
I'm not sure.
Hey, excuse me, Mr. Haynes,
He can talk to me.
Yeah,
yeah, the profanity is
I
inappropriate.
didn't.
Oh, did he curse?
Yes.
Mr. Haynes, could you know better than that? If that's what you did?
Pardon me?
I said, he said you used profane language. If you did, please don't. Okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
With respect to the variance hearing on April 27th of 2016 that you didn't recall, but then when I showed you the transcript, you recalled it.
Yes,
Do you recall after your testimony, Mr. Kostecki did give testimony, sworn testimony before this zoning hearing panel that the green buildings could be, in fact, converted to residential? Do you recall that testimony?
do not.
If you could turn to the transcript.
Took it back over there.
First,
You can use it. Sure. You can use sworn testimony. Impeachment, right? He can use it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, he can.
Okay.
I'm just asking you to see if this refresh. And I can narrow it more, but page 69, lines 8 through 11. Mr. Kostecki, in other words, are you saying could we convert the green buildings to residential for 722,000 ? Probably. Does that refresh your recollection?
I can read what it says right in front of me here, yes.
Okay. And then further, there's a question by Mr. Haynes to Mr. Kostecki at page 73. Or 70. I'm sorry, 76. You can just review that page. 76.
76?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay,
Okay, so you agree with me that there was testimony, sworn testimony by Mr. Kostecki that the green buildings could be converted to residential, correct?
Objection. What's the relevance of this testimony?
Yeah, I thought you were going to pull his testimony out. I'm not sure what
It's
Kostecki
refreshing.
has.
He's saying,
Except he's saying he's not sure. What does it matter what Kostecki said? I'm not sure. I thought you were going to pull out testimony that he said it, right?
Yeah, right, yeah, and Kostecki's not here to defend himself or answer his own questions or be
because
asked
it's
questions.
cross-examination. He's saying from an engineering perspective, he doesn't know. He was at this hearing. He gave sworn testimony. He listened, he was there for the duration of it, and there was sworn testimony with respect to the
Yeah, see,
conversion to residential.
I was thinking it was Mr. Bonnick's own testimony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it's?
I mean,
It's not
people,
even under oath.
engineers have different
that is
opinions.
Hold on, that is under oath. But it's Kostecki, just another witness.
Yeah.
Who's not
Yeah.
here to answer his questions, to
Yeah.
answer questions of the board, which is where
Yeah.
we've got the whole first meeting, the first night.
Yeah,
We weren't gonna
I-
admit-
that'll be sustained.
No, respectfully.
Yeah.
It's cross-examination. I just want to be clear on the record.
Go
This is
ahead.
Cross-examination. I was asking questions from sworn testimony before this very zoning hearing board of
Okay.
April 27 of 2016. I've laid the foundation. Mr. Bonnick has testified that he was present for that particular hearing. He's just given me testimony that he doesn't know if the property could be
Right.
converted to residential. I'm simply cross-examining him with testimony from Mr. Kostecki at a hearing that he attended.
Okay, but stop, Mr. Stevens. I think to me, all this is Mr. Bonnick now hearing somebody says something different.
Yeah.
I'm not, I think you had a legitimate point if Mr. Bonnick had testified at that hearing that he thought it could be. I'm just,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
Now,
I agree.
yeah, so that's sustained to Mr. Kostecki's testimony. So what? I mean, it's someone who disagrees with Mr. Bonick, maybe. I mean, but yeah, if Mr. Bonick testified, feel free to point that out. Agree?
Yes,
agree.
Board? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Let me ask you, after reviewing Mr. Kostecki's testimony at the zoning hearing meeting of April 27 of 2016, does that in any way make you change your testimony that in fact, after now looking at sworn testimony from a construction person, that in fact,
It's the same
Yeah.
question.
the
Okay.
residential property can be converted, the green building commercial properties can be converted to residential?
Just go ahead and answer that one if it changed your
No.
mind. Okay.
And have you had any conversations with Mr. Kostecki with respect to West Market Street at any point in time?
No.
Now, let's assume for a moment that the two green buildings at 2 West Market Street are residential. Let's just assume that for purposes of my questions.
So your assumption is that the current use of those buildings as we see it today would be residential?
Right.
That's your assumption. Okay?
And if you look at Exhibit C5, that's 56 East Market Street. So it should be the second one in your package. Not 2 West Market Street. This property, C5, 56 East Market Street.
Okay. I have that in front of me here, so.
You should have well, you testified to these photographs, Mr. Bonick. I'm just asking you to pull the photographic exhibits C4 to C14 and direct your attention to C5,
What's the property address?
56 East Market Street.
I have C5.
Okay, so you flipped through it. You'll agree with me that there's the main single-family dwelling that fronts Market Street that's depicted in the first 3 pages, correct?
Yes.
And then there's a second single-family dwelling in the middle of the parcel, the red brick property that's in the next 2 pages. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
And then there's an apartment off the back. In the remaining photographs, you don't take a picture of the garage portion, the carriage house garage, but there's another section of apartments, multi-units off the back of the red brick, correct?
Well, there's a rear building with 3 garage doors on the bottom and a structure above that could be used for something. I don't know what the use of the structure above is.
Right, so essentially we have the single-family dwelling that fronts Market Street. We've got the red brick, another single-family dwelling in the middle of the property, and then we've got the apartments and garages off the back, correct?
I don't know if the rear structure is apartments and garages.
There's a rear structure off the back, correct?
The rear structure off the back, yes.
Okay, so we have multiple structures going on on a single parcel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In this case, they're all residential use, correct?
Yes.
Taking my
Well,
assumption,
Again, I don't know what the use of the rear building is at this point.
okay. You don't have any reason to believe there's any kind of a commercial retail use on this parcel, correct?
I don't know what the use of the rear building is.
going back to 2 West Market Street, we have several different structures, correct? We've got the corners, the 2 green buildings, correct, that I've asked you to assume are residential. You've got,
That conversation is part of your assumption of residential use on 2 West Market?
I'm asking you, you have several structures on 2 West Market Street. You've got the green buildings, correct?
Yes,
You've got the single-family residence that fronts Market Street, correct?
yes.
And you've got a garage, correct?
The carriage house.
Let's turn to C13. And that's 241 East Market. You with me? Do you have that?
Is this part of the same consideration of the assumed land use of the green buildings? Is that part of the same paradigm, just so I'm clear?
Yeah, I'm still on the
supposed
hypothetical.
to be.
We're assuming the 2 green buildings at 2 West Market Street are residential.
Which they are not, by the way.
But I'm asking you, and you can, as an expert, assume they are residential for purposes of this line of questioning. So I've asked you to turn now
Okay.
to Exhibit C13. And let me know when you've had a chance to look at that.
What's the address here?
241 East Market Street. It's been marked as Exhibit C13. Looks like this. It's the Benner, the old Benner property, red brick, federal style property. Red Cross.
Okay,
So in that parcel, we have a single family, the red brick residential that fronts East Market Street, correct?
yes.
And then behind that property, there's another structure. It's marked 244 on the door. Do you see that separate structure? Right.
Yes,
You're under it.
yes.
So that's structure number 2. Structure number 3, as depicted in this photograph, you got the red brick. You've got the structure 244, and then there's another structure on that same parcel, correct?
Which picture you're referring to now? Okay. I see the picture.
So there are a total of 3 structures on this particular parcel, correct?
I believe so.
And you have no reason to dispute that they're all of residential use, or you just don't know one way or the other.
Well, the county data for that parcel refers to 2 living units.
But you'll agree with me, there are three
So-
separate structures.
So if there are 3 structures on the property and the county records indicate 2 living units, then I'm unsure of the use of the 3rd structure.
Okay. But at least 2 of them are residential, correct?
Appears so, yes.
Okay. So we've just run through 2 West Market Street with our assumption. There's the green buildings, we've got the main single-family dwelling, and we've got the carriage house. 3 structures, correct?
With the assumed land use under your paradigm that they're residential.
Correct. We looked at 48 East Market Street that had the single-family dwelling that fronted Market Street, the red brick building, and then the garages, apartments off the back, correct?
Which one was that?
I thought it was 56.
I thought it was 56.
I'm sorry, 56 East,
Yeah.
56 East Market Street, the C5 exhibit that we talked about.
We also examined that property. I don't recall the details of it right now, but a lot of properties are being looked at here right this
Right.
evening, so yeah.
So there's the single family dwelling at C5, 56 East Market Street. We've got the red brick building in the back of that same parcel, and then we've got the apartments, garages off the back, correct?
We have a rear building with an upper use, which is not determined at this point.
And then we looked at C13, and we've identified 3 separate structures on that parcel, and you've identified that at least 2 of those are residential, correct?
Yes.
Now, why don't we take a look at 18 East Market Street, and that's C4 of the photographs that you supplied.
18.
C4,
18 East Market Street?
yeah, it's the Heinzman Law Office and the building behind it.
Yeah.
C4, are you with me?
I think so, yeah.
You agree with me that there are 2 separate structures on that parcel, correct?
Yes.
And you'll agree with me that it's at the corner of 2 streets, correct?
The side street might be characterized as an alley, I'm not sure.
Oh, fair enough. So we will agree with me that Market Street is a street, correct?
Yes,
The side street is Long Street, that may be a street, it may be an alley, you're just not sure.
yes,
As far as the law office, I think you even identified in your earlier testimony that that's a non-conforming commercial use in the single-family dwelling, correct?
yes,
And then behind it is the separate structure that has the apartments in it, correct? As depicted in C4, correct?
yes.
And as far as 1304.04B, if the owner wanted to convert the back apartments to a single family dwelling, and then you have the main residence with a commercial use, you're at the corner of 2 streets.
Are we pretending that Long is a street, not an alley, in addition to the other 2, in addition to 2 West Market being residential, not commercial?
We
Right,
could
'cause
just-
didn't we say, I thought we said Long was an alley and that's what this.
No, he didn't say that. He didn't say one way or the other. If
Okay,
it's
so
an
then,
alley-
but your question said it's at the corner of 2 streets. So are you making the presumption that Long is it not an alley for this question?
I think we should. Let's, for purposes
so,
of
all right.
clarification.
So I want to make clear as to what our hypotheticals are on this one.
That's
Okay,
fine. Assume Long is a street. So it's at the corner of 2 streets. You've got the Heinzman Law Office, a non-conforming commercial use in the main residential property, and you've got the separate building off the back. The property owner very well could convert the apartments to a single-family dwelling. And you have the non-conforming. You have a commercial use on the property. It's at the corner of 2 streets. I mean, you could easily apply 1304.04B to this property, could you not?
Objection. I don't know what you just said. It's a
Well,
compound question.
just see if he can answer it, because I'm not sure either, but maybe
I don't
Mr.
know.
Bonick will amaze us all.
When you looked at this particular property, 18 East Market Street, is that something that you looked and analyzed as to whether or not it could be subject to 1304.04B?
Yes,
Okay, just to understand your question. So were you saying if someone made those 2 apartments into one, so you believe, okay, all right, now I'm understanding what you're saying is you were presuming Long was a street and then converting the 2 apartments into a single family dwelling and asking if that could qualify under B.
Correct.
All right. I don't know if he knows, but I think I get the question now.
With that qualification, can you answer the question?
that's quite a few qualifications. But under that paradigm, then you would be proposing to convert the apartments into a single-family dwelling?
That would give you your single-family dwelling under 1304.04B. You got a
So-
commercial use.
So you'd be converting a non-conforming use?
No, the residence is conforming. You're just taking the apartments and making it single family.
No, the use of this property is a mixed-use property with a commercial use that fronts on Market Street. And there's 2 residences in the back of the property. So the existing use of that property today, under no assumptions, is an existing non-conforming use.
Correct. And based on the paradigm, assume it's at the corner of 2 streets. You have a non-conforming commercial use, the main building. Now you've converted the apartments off the back, make it that single family. That would make it eligible for 1304.04B, correct?
Disagree.
You have to speak in the microphone.
Thanks.
Now, moving on to, and this will be a new exhibit. I think I'm up to 49. I'm up to 49.
Thank you.
Have you, we're up to exhibit, Pelham's exhibit 49. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I had 48 as the last one.
Right, so mark this as exhibit 49. I'll represent to you that it depicts the property at 204 East Market Street that's at the corner of East Market and New Street.
What's the address?
Yeah.
204 East Market Street.
Doesn't say
Yeah,
199.
it does say
It
199.
says 199 at the
Yeah,
top.
that's confusing. The actual, that's because that's where the Google,
Ah.
the Google shot is at 199 East Market. I'll represent to the board that property, the pediatrician office, the old pediatrician.
Oh,
office is
so
204
this
East
photo
Market.
is taken from 199,
Correct.
looking at what you're saying is 204.
The
Gotcha.
property is 204 East
The
Market.
building,
The building,
property with the building on is 204.
yes.
I would just like to know, I mean, maybe you can authenticate this, I don't know, but he has to authenticate it first. I mean, Mr. Bonnet didn't take this photo. Mr. Stevens' representation notwithstanding, I think we need to lay a foundation here.
Mr. Bonnet, you testified earlier that you're familiar with the various blocks around your office in the historic district, correct?
Yes.
Are you familiar with this building that sits at the corner of High and East Market Street?
No.
Did you take this particular property into consideration when you did your analysis for eligible properties under 1304.04B?
Objection assumes facts, not evidence. There's no facts to establish what this photo is. It hasn't been authenticated.
Yeah, I guess that's okay, but he could ask him if he looked at 204, right? Right,
That's what I'm asking.
right, but you said the property in the picture, and we still don't know if this is in fact 204. Are you asking him, did he take 204 into?
Yes.
Okay, just then answer that question, right?
If he knows where it is.
During what phase of this consideration are you referring to now?
Any phase. If you look at 204 East Market Street.
Did not.
So you wouldn't know one way or the other as far as this property, first of all, sitting at the corner of two streets, you don't know one way or the other?
Objection. No foundation to ask questions about this photograph.
Not the photo,
No,
but
I'm not asking you.
204.
I'm asking
When you say
simply
this
asking
property,
for-
you're not referring to the photo, you're referring to
For
204.
204 East Market Street.
Okay,
Do you have any
perfect.
idea if 204 East Market Street sits at the corner of two streets in the
No.
city of Bethlehem?
Do not.
Do you have any idea as to whether or not there is a commercial use existing at 204 East Market Street?
Do not.
Do you have any idea if there's a residential use at 204 East Market Street?
Do not.
Turning to the actual amendment itself, if you could look in Exhibit 16 of Appellant's Exhibits. In terms of the amendment itself. Just tell me when you're there. I mean, Exhibit 16, the attachment is the subject amendment 1304.04B. 1304.04B. You with me?
Mhm.
And then and I think you confirmed this in your earlier testimony, but I just want to go through the actual amendment, and where at B subsection 2, it states the office use shall be limited to within the existing single-family dwelling. Do you see that language?
I do.
Okay, and I think you confirmed that the business office has to go in the single-family dwelling, correct?
What the ordinance says,
Okay.
yes.
Let's take, for example, 2 West Market Street. To the extent that there is a non-conforming commercial or retail use, there was no effort or anything with respect to this amendment where the office space would go in the commercial space, but the residential single-family dwelling would remain residential to minimize the impact of this amendment, correct?
Objection. Compound vague question.
I think-
It also, it goes to the motivation of council in passing the amendment, which is not relevant to our proceeding. Or, I don't know how he would know about what went into passing the amendment.
I'm not asking about passing the amendment. He's presented himself as the expert in zoning, in reviewing zoning ordinances. And I think it's,
Do me a favor, can you ask the question again, in light of that objection? I apologize, I was trying to follow along, but.
so based on that particular provision, it's mandatory that the business office space has to go in the single family residential, correct?
Objection. We have an ordinance. What is the reason for asking him what it says? I mean, it says what it says. It speaks for itself.
I am laying the foundation. If I didn't ask this question, then I get the objection that I haven't properly laid the foundation to ask my follow-up question.
To move it along, just answer it. It says what it says. Does it say that, Mr. Bonick?
Just to clarify, is this based on actual land use now or hypothetical land use? Which land use you're referring to in this?
We're simply,
this line of reasoning.
we're simply referring to the ordinance itself and what it says.
So the hypothetical land use is no longer part of this consideration.
We've moved on. We're beyond that.
Moved
Mr.
on.
Bennett.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Excuse me?
Again? Question?
You'll agree with me that the commercial office use has to go in the single family dwelling per 1304.04B2, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And going forward, that's how it has to be. Whenever you have this combination of a single family dwelling, commercial retail use, and you apply 1304.04B, the residential property, the single family dwelling is the one that has to have the business office, correct?
Yes.
And with respect to your consideration of this amendment, did you ever make any recommendation or have any consideration that this amendment should be reworded or prepared in such a way where the business office use would go in the commercial retail space, in this case, to West Market, the green buildings, as opposed to the residential property?
Objection, irrelevant. I don't get this at all. There's a law, it has to be lawful, non-conforming commercial or retail use in the other property. That has to be on the premises. So we know that there's going to be a commercial or retail use on the premises. Presumably, that's where a retail or commercial use can go. It's just that when you have a single family residence, a office use can go in there as well. I struggle to follow along with what these questions are.
Yeah, I'm not sure when you say his consideration. I'm kind of lost on that.
I mean, the purpose of the question is to explore, like, he's here to comment on this amendment and its validity.
right, okay.
So my question to him is, okay, it's prepared in such a way where the commercial office use has to go in the residential property.
Yes, we
So
got that.
My question to him is, why not word this, prepare this such that the commercial office goes into the existing commercial space as opposed to the residential property? That's all I'm
That
asking.
goes back to what happened before. And I think
This
we're
is
stuck
that,
with
this
the,
is an expert.
we're stuck with the amendment as it is.
Yeah, what does that mean, validity?
But the question is, like you said, because there is a commercial or retail use in the other space. It has to be there. It has to be a lawful, non-conforming
Yeah.
use.
Well, yeah, I guess, I mean, for this ordinance to work, okay, it says you have to have certain business uses in one part, a single family dwelling in which you put the business use, right? I mean, that's the essence of the ordinance. I guess I'm just missing the point of the question, saying, why not put the business in? There is a business there.
It's to reduce the impact. Okay, so if you want business office use in a residential property, fine. You already have a commercial retail use. Why don't we put the
I get that
commercial
that's
office
I get that that's
space
your argument, but I don't know what it has to do with the,
Yeah,
we're
don't-
changing the text of the ordinance now, right? I mean, you can ask them what would happen if you did that, but it seems to me the ordinance is what the ordinance is. You
Right.
can make the argument that it makes no sense to do that, but I just am unsure why we're having him comment on something that the ordinance doesn't say.
because it's exploring with him as to a means of forming this amendment in a manner that it would have less impact on a residential district.
But we
That's
can't-
not what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're not,
Yeah, I
we're not
guess
playing
we're-
games here.
Yeah, I mean, we're ruling on whether the way it's drafted is passes muster, I'll
Right,
call it, right?
exactly.
And that's the reason I'm bringing it up, is to show, well, it doesn't pass muster the way it's worded, because now you're putting
Okay, that's your argument.
It's your argument.
Perfect.
But
I
I
get that.
think I have an opportunity to explore that through their expert to see to what extent he agrees with that, disagrees with it.
Well, I mean, I guess to
But
me,
can you
the question.
acknowledge that, yes, that would have less impact than this particular?
Okay, but
section?
why didn't you ask that question? Would it have less, right? Because that's not what you're asking. You're asking him to say the ordinance should have the business go into the existing business use. I mean, I guess the question could be, would there be less businesses present if you made the business go in the business and made the single family home stay as the single family home, right? Isn't that what you're asking?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean,
Once again, the question, please.
As part of your analysis, did you look at whether or not there would be less impact on a residential district if the business office use would go in the existing commercial retail space as opposed to the residential property, the single family property? Did you look at that issue at all?
okay.
Okay, now, and just so we understand, your understanding of 1404.04B, for this to, for 1304.04B to work, there has to be the single family dwelling where you put the business office in, and then the commercial or the retail space has to continue in those properties. Is that how it works? Because you need both. You need the commercial retail and you need the single family that's going to get the business office use.
Yes.
Okay, let's turn to the Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan. Mr. Bannock, you gave earlier testimony with respect to the comprehensive plan. I just want to go over that testimony. So if you just pull that out. And then I have an exhibit. So we're up to 50, right? These are select portions of the Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan that I'm going to explore. It's in the larger exhibit. The whole Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan has been submitted to the board. This is just for ease of reference. I pulled key pages where I'm going to have questions of Mr. Bell. And we'll mark this appellant's exhibit. I think we're up to 50 now.
Correct.
Can't we just use the existing exhibit for ease of reference and
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you've got the pages. Just ask them what pages to look at, and we'll take these. But yeah, so
it's
all right. So we're not going to actually use 50. Just ask them the questions on that. We'll keep C2, but we can use this to make paging quicker.
Again, I'm trying to speed things up. By
Oh
now.
yeah, I'm just doing it my way would speed it up too. So we're good.
That's fine.
So we've got just those pages, but
So
he's got the original. That way we don't have to check whether this is a true and correct copy, right? Perfect.
So the Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan, that was marked as C2?
Yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah.
if you're going to use C2 or 50, just look, which one do you want to use?
Use C2, please.
C2, you turn to,
And then you've got the page numbers on this, right? So.
Yeah.
Perfect.
310.
Okay.
I believe you made a reference to section 310 in your earlier testimony, correct, Mr. Bonnick?
I did, yes.
And I think you referenced in this section, high-density residential, portions of high-density residential areas could also allow for offices, personal care / assisted living homes, nursing homes, funeral homes, daycare centers, senior housing facilities, and related uses, correct?
Correct.
Now, isn't it true as far as offices in both the RT and the RG districts, offices are not allowed except for home occupation and 1304.04A, which is the corner store. And then obviously this new amendment, but those are the only provisions for offices, correct?
okay.
I don't know.
I think, you mean, it's like saying, what does the statute say? It's a matter of law. I don't think his testimony here is relevant.
And this goes, he's making certain assumptions in the Bethlehem comprehensive
I think he can
plan.
answer if he knows.
And I'm
what's-
asking him questions on the Bethlehem zoning ordinance that there's limits to what offices are allowed in both the RT and the RG district.
If he knows, I mean.
I don't know. I'd have to study the ordinance to
Well,
confirm that.
Why don't you turn to 1302.56 of the ordinance and take a look at that.
If he turns to the ordinance.
Have you taken a look at that?
At
And it defines,
1302.56,
both A and B define minor home occupation and major home occupation, correct?
yes?
And then if you turn to the uses in 1304.041 for RG and RT districts. You with me? Home occupation or offices that are allowed there. By special exception for major home occupation. And then they're permitted in both RT and RG for minor home occupation, correct?
Appears to be, yeah.
Okay. And yeah, we generally just know home occupation, they're home offices, correct? Is that how you understand those types of offices?
No.
Okay. Well, they're defined as home occupation offices. What the zoning ordinance speaks for itself. Those are the only offices that are allowed in the RT and RG district, correct?
I don't know.
Okay, turning to page section 4.7, you had some discussion about the smart growth at 4.7 and 4.8. You take a look at those.
Yes,
Are you there?
yes.
On the first page of 4.7 in the middle, it talks about smart growth principles, create range of housing opportunities and choices. Do you see that?
Yes,
You'll agree with me that 1304.04B does not create a range of housing opportunities and choices because you're taking a residential property, a single-family dwelling property, and converting it to commercial, correct?
again?
Isn't it true that with 1304.04B, you're not creating a range of housing opportunities and choices because 1304.04B takes a single-family residential property and converts it to commercial. So you're taking residential properties away, correct? Correct?
Compound question.
Is that correct?
What was the objection?
Compound question. First of all, he ends by saying.
It's,
Wait a second. You cannot overspeak. One at a time.
My response, Mr. Stevens seems to think that all manner of sins can be swept under the rug of each cross-examination. The questions have to be relevant and have to be properly phrased. The question he just asked ended with converting a residential use to a commercial use. So is that the question, or is it the question something else, whatever he
Well,
asked before?
Okay, so
If
Mr.
he
Stevens,
cannot-
hold on
if
a
he's-
second. Let me ask you a question real quick. So when Mr. Bonnick testified, I looked at my notes and he said smart growth principles and he said mixed land uses. That's the only one he testified about.
and fair enough. That's why I'm able to go into smart growth and,
Well,
and
so what?
cross-examine him on other areas that he
Well,
didn't,
except
that he didn't look at.
Yeah, I guess
and-
I just
and
don't know. I mean,
if you-
create
if-
walkable neighborhoods. Maybe this does, maybe this doesn't. You can walk from your office, you can walk from your house. I guess he
But-
just said a smart growth principle is mixed land use.
Exactly, and that's the point. He can't go in and cherry pick certain portions of the comprehensive plan and say, "Oh, it complies with this portion." What do you need? What an expert needs to do is to look at
Well,
all the different areas of the
well, then you can make that
comprehensive
in
plan.
an argument. I don't know why we just need him to read. Why don't we take notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 smart growth principles under that section? We can read them. I mean, I guess I don't.
I think the import is the fact that that an expert witness needs to respond as to whether or not there is compliance, or as to whether or not this particular zoning amendment comports or complies with this particular part of the comprehensive plan. That's perfectly relevant to explore.
Well, except the comprehensive plan is a blend. I mean, obviously, preserving open space would be contrary to creating a range of housing opportunities. I mean, these are 7 different things that smart growth takes into effect. I don't think each provision of the ordinance takes every one of these 7 in. That's what I'm
Yeah,
that's
I
what I'm
just don't know
missing.
where you're going.
Yeah, we get it that it doesn't, that taking a house and making it a business doesn't create a housing opportunity.
Fair,
Correct.
if we can
Fair
have
enough.
if we can have a stipulation to that effect,
Well,
fine,
it says
but
what it
but
says.
but that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this expert to agree to exactly what the
But
solicitor just said.
yeah, except we could sit
Why-
here and go through the entire comprehensive plan, many of which has nothing to do with this. I guess I'm just wondering, a smart growth, it doesn't say smart growth principles for the RT district in converting uses. I guess I'm just missing the point here, but,
Yeah,
all right.
I have to move on.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's see just ask this question again and we'll see where this one goes. Try to ask it, more specifically, but I mean, we're not just going to listen. I mean, it has nothing to do with walkable neighbor. These are just principles. And he said it happens to advance one of them. We'll look and determine if it advances the other 6, but they're things that are taken into account. They don't all apply in every instance. That's what I don't understand why it matters.
Mr. Bonnick, you will agree with me that 1304.04B reduces the range of housing choices because single-family residential properties are being converted to commercial properties, correct?
Yeah, that's sustained. It's not a range of housing. That's an individual house.
Can I raise a larger issue here? Because
Let me respond.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we're not just talking, that's the point. We're not just talking about one house. Well, maybe the applicant, the property owner this is all homes that fall under
But a range of
1304.04B.
housing opportunities means single family homes, twins, etc. This has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Sustain.
yeah, I just
Well, no, he doesn't need to speak yet.
Okay,
It-
fine.
We sustain the objection to that question, but ask another. Do you see what I'm saying? You're saying this just takes away an individual house. Housing opportunities are single family homes, mixes of things like that.
That is the essence of the question.
Okay.
In that this particular, you can read it.
We can
as
read
we
it.
know from the city plan, it could be read one way, just a single family detached home, or it could fall into single family homes, twins, or row homes.
But it's not.
So there are a range of housing opportunities.
It's not stripping the city of single family homes. That's what it. Okay. I mean, I guess I just don't understand, but
I don't either.
okay. Just ask that question. Just answer that, Mr. Bonnick, and then we'll go to the next one. Just to get it on the record. But I don't understand the point of that one, but go ahead. I apologize. I'm just missing. I mean, you're just talking about housing. This is talking about concepts. It's not talking about individual houses. That's why. So I'm trying to get the point, so I understand the question. Maybe I'm.
I think it's very simple that the 1304.04B amendment is taking residential properties out of the housing stock because they're being converted over to commercial
Okay.
properties. That's what it does. And that's the question. That's what I just asked.
Yeah, but there's a larger issue here, and it goes back to this confused understanding of zoning law. Here we are again talking about the point being that this zoning amendment doesn't comport with the comprehensive plan. That's what we're going back and forth. Everybody's been
Right.
arguing about that. And if I read the governing law, which is the municipalities planning code, verbatim, it states that notwithstanding any other provision of this act, which is the municipalities planning code, no action by the governing body of a municipality shall be invalid, nor shall the same be subject to challenge or appeal on the basis that such action is inconsistent with or fails to comply with the provisions of a comprehensive plan. So we're spending all this time going all the way around Dick's Barn for no purpose.
Yeah,
And I
and I
respectfully-
still get back to, he only testified that this creates a mix of land uses. So if you want to question him about that, that's it.
And I think that's inappropriately narrowing the testimony for the reason I said before. He can't cherry pick and say there's
Well, you
compliance
can make-
with the comprehensive plan just because.
Okay, you've already made that argument,
Yeah,
though. We've
okay.
heard that like 5 times now.
Yeah.
And Attorney Stevens, you're rebutting what he
Okay.
said,
All
not
right.
going into new areas that he didn't go into. So please rebut what he testified to. If he didn't testify to something, please don't.
I guess I just don't understand that, Mr. Bonick, does this provide a variety of transportation choices? Well, no, I mean, I mean, those are the 7 principles. That's what I don't get. You
Okay,
just talked about a mix of land uses, and you certainly can just ask him generally, you've asked him a lot of times and a lot of witnesses, does it remove a single family residence and change it into the business? Correct. We've got that, right?
and that's where I'm now applying that to the comprehensive plan, where we have an admission on the record that you're taking residential properties and converting them to
Right.
commercial uses. That's inconsistent with smart growth principle number 1, to create a range of housing opportunities and choices, because you're taking residential properties.
But it's
and
consistent with
converting-
the 5th one.
Converting them to residential.
Okay.
It's consistent with the paragraph above the principles, if you read it.
Yeah. I mean,
New smart growth is more town-centered, it is transit and pedestrian-oriented, and has a greater mix of housing, commercial, and retail uses. That's what it says here.
Taking to its logical extreme, Mr. Stevens' argument suggests that we should limit the range of non-residential zones in the city to the constitutional minimum, because that will
Right.
greatly expand housing opportunities. I just don't think
yeah,
it's relevant.
that's, I agree. Yeah. So, but you can make that argument, but I just don't know what it has to do with the fact that he testified one of the smart growth principles is to mix land
Mhm.
uses, and what Mr. Novotny just read. So go to the next line of questioning, please.
Fair enough.
Thanks.
So if we could turn to section 4.8.
Okay.
Now, in your earlier testimony, you told us that the 8 properties that you submitted was not a comprehensive list, correct?
Yes,
And other than what you testified here today, you didn't do any further study as far as what other properties would be eligible for under 1304.046, correct?
Objection asked me.
Yeah, I was.
Sustained.
What's that? Now, with respect to the mixed residential, non-residential uses where appropriate, you testified about that particular provision in the Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan, correct?
yes,
But as per your testimony, you were not able to identify the precise numbers of houses that are eligible for 1304.04B, nor were you able to pinpoint the locations of those properties, correct?
yes. As of the year 2000, there were 29,631 properties in the city of Bethlehem. It was not within the scope of my analysis to review each and every one of those properties.
But for purposes of the analysis of this amendment, you're only looking at districts RT and RG, correct? So that narrowed the number of houses, correct?
Yes,
So you've been unable to identify the where these properties are located, nor the number of properties, correct?
I don't know what that question means.
You've been unable to identify the total number of properties, nor the location of these properties based upon your analysis, correct?
That's correct.
If we could turn to the action plan section of the Bethlehem Comprehensive Plan.
Action program, is that what you mean?
Action program,
Yeah.
you,
Well,
just so I'm
Well,
clear,
too.
you gave testimony with respect to this action program, correct?
I did, yes.
And if you turn to numbered paragraph 3 in the housing and neighborhood strategy section, it talks about ensure city zoning encourage mixed residential / non-residential non-residential uses in appropriate locations. Do you see that?
That's what it says.
And just based on your immediate prior testimony, you were unable to identify where all these properties are located, and then total number of properties, correct?
That's what I said, yes.
It also talks about limiting conversion to one-unit structures into apartments. Do you see that as part of this action program?
Which number is that?
That's number 5.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I see that. Mhm.
So there's a concern as far as maintaining single family or single properties and preventing them from turning into multi-units, correct?
Yes,
Okay, but 1304.04B takes a single family, a single unit, and converts it to commercial, correct?
yes,
And number 9, use zoning to ensure commercial uses and adjacent residential uses are compatible. Do you see that?
yes,
But as you've told us before, you've been unable to identify where all these properties are located and the number of properties, correct? Correct?
that's correct.
And number 10 talks about pursuing a multifaceted approach to create more affordable workforce housing. Do you see that?
Yes,
1304.04B does not create more workforce housing, correct? Because it takes housing or residential properties and converts it to commercial, correct?
Objection relevant.
Yeah, that's sustained. That one doesn't, it's again like saying there's probably one that talks about farmland and we know it doesn't do farmland. The other ones I thought were relevant to that question. The workforce housing has nothing to do with it.
And number 14 talks about recognizing commercial building upper floors as possible affordable housing locations. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
And 1304.04B does not do that because it takes the single family residence and the whole residence is converted to the office space, correct?
Objection.
Yeah, that
He's
one's
testifying, I mean.
that's sustained too.
We have no further questions on behalf of the appellants. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
At this point, I think we could all use a 5-minute break.
Okay.
We'll reconvene at 10 after.
Wait here, pencil. All right.
They can ask.
gonna be like this. Tell you what to say.
Let me get a picture of that.
It's already on film. Jim, you have lots of witnesses.
Phenomenal feat.
I don't remember the exact thing, but she said.
That long-haired person kid have something. They're gonna break it. Say about that. You have to be a freshman. Yeah, he was. I know. They weren't playing him.
You love how I tell everybody here's $5. It's true.
Oh, yeah, we should. No, I agree with you.
He thinks the champagne bottle that they placed on the. Dumb. I don't think it looks dumb.
For the year.
I'll be honest.
I mean, yeah, that's not fair to you.
I don't
Of course,
recall.
it
if
is
we
right
asked
next to
Preston.
the mixer.
No, I don't.
So ask the board
Okay.
and then ask Preston.
Um,
Or ask Preston first and then ask the board.
Oh, he's not a voting member. He's not. Let's go.
we're ready?
Okay.
Let's go back on the record. Attorney Preston, do you have any questions of Mr. Bonnick?
Just one for to establish a foundation.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bonnick, you have a map that shows the properties up and down West Market Street. Is that correct?
Again,
You have a map here that you were referring to earlier that showed properties on West Market Street.
Just
Yes.
so is
What- what-
C15, is that map? Is there,
Map T15.
yes,
And that shows the property to West Market, is that correct?
it does, yes.
And then moving down West Market on the same block going down the hill. Immediately next door is that red brick. That was what, an apartment building?
Yes,
Then immediately next to that is a building that.
objection? Oh, I withdraw.
Thank you. The building immediately next to that identified as, I believe the address is 14 West Market.
yes,
You know how that building's currently used?
Yes, it's owned by Market Street Financial Advisors LLC.
I have no further questions. I'd just like to hand up a prior zoning opinion, ask the board to take judicial notice. It's just to address this notion that there's a trend in the area and which way the trend is going, if it's necessary for the record, that's all. I
And
think it speaks for itself.
I think objection, relevance, it is no relevance whatsoever.
It
And-
does, because in this particular instance, we took a single-family dwelling and converted it into a financial services
Well,
offices,
it- and
which
it-
is,
Hold
which
on,
is,
let him finish.
which is in opposition to your claim that the trend is that they're moving in one direction. This one moved in the other direction.
And it's
Two
creating
doors
now
away.
a trial within another trial in that, okay, there was this whole other zoning proceeding for a subject property. Fine, I could bring in witnesses on rebuttal to rebut that opinion to show that, yeah, it was a financial services office, but it's a couple, they live there. It's essentially.
Just the
Hold on,
trend.
hold on,
We're
hold
just
on.
Let me, can I please finish
No,
setting
no,
my
you can, no,
objection?
no. Okay, I understand where you're going, Mr. Stevens. I just want to ask you a question so you can answer my question.
Yes.
Which is, you elicited a significant amount of testimony about things that have been what you call deconverted from businesses to single family, correct? Just tell me why this is different. I'm fine, but I don't understand in what you're saying. It's a zoning decision. I'm just,
Because it's a zoning decision. I should be able to put on testimony that, fine, yeah, it's a property with two structures on it, but it's a married couple. They run a home office
Doesn't
out of
answer
the
my
one. There's a
question.
pool in the middle.
Mr. Stevens, my
It's
question
not
is.
relevant.
Wait a minute.
Mr.
wait a minute.
Stevens,
You
cannot
can't talk
overstep
over me,
it.
please, okay?
I can't, this record is just gonna be a
Okay?
mess.
I asked you the question, which is, if you kept asking questions about ones that were commercial deconverted to residence, and he wants to put in a decision that was, he's saying the opposite. I just want you to explain to me why that wouldn't be. That's all I'm asking.
Because I've had no opportunity to look at this decision.
Well,
It's
I'm not offering it for the merits
Right.
of the decision, simply to establish the fact that on this very same block, there was a single-family residence that is now a financial services offices. That's the sole fact that I'm
Right.
offering it for. I just want it in the record. Should this argument of a trend come in my direction, I just simply want to be able to have this in the record.
and
For that
I
purpose.
reserve the right to produce rebuttal witnesses to establish that particular zoning situation was much more akin to a home office situation because it's a married couple. Yeah, there are two structures.
But why do you need a rebuttal witness? Doesn't the decision say that? Just look at the decision. If it says what you say, then it's fine. It's a decision. In other words, wouldn't the decision say if it was what the facts were that you're saying? That's what I'm asking you. Mr. Preston, we're not going to admit it unless you show it to him, right? Why don't you show it to him? And that's all I'm saying, Mr. Stevens, is you're saying I want to rebut it because it is X, Y, and Z. The facts should say that, and then you can argue that, right?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to place on the record, this is the first time I'm seeing this particular opinion. I don't know what the status was. I don't know if it was ever taken up an appeal. I want to preserve my right on the record to produce rebuttal witnesses to counter, what the circumstances were. I haven't had an opportunity to read it. From what I'm seeing is
You can do that.
a
you can do that in this brief.
15, 16, 17-page opinion that
But he
is
brought some up.
Well, I just don't understand how it's different than when you asked about all the ones that have been deconverted from businesses to residential.
point is, I don't know if it's different. I haven't had an opportunity to
Overruled.
read it.
Okay, it's overruled. We'll take it. And if you want to address that in your brief,
Yes.
you
address
can.
it in your brief.
After you get a chance to read the decision. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, perfect.
Hand it up.
Yeah.
And just so the record is clear, is my request to produce any kind of rebuttal witnesses, is that being denied?
No, you, not at this time.
Okay.
Okay. But it would have to be tonight if we were finishing tonight. Otherwise, you can address based upon, it's a zoning decision. We take judicial notice. The facts are in there.
And again, I'm not offering it for the merit
Right.
of the decision. I'm not here to
Just the fact that
brief or appeal
Yeah.
the decision.
Yeah.
Just simply to establish the fact that there was a single-family residence in the not-too-distant past that was then converted to a use very similar to the one that's before the board this evening.
Yeah,
That's
because
all.
we're, yeah,
Nothing more.
okay. And is that any different than what you were arguing that, and presented evidence on, that there are ones that went from commercial and what you call deconversion, right? It's just the opposite. That's what I'm trying to establish. Is this,
I have to read the opinion before I can.
Okay.
comment.
all right. And what exhibit number is that, Mr. Preston? Do you know?
That would be. Yeah, I think it is. That would be intervener 1.
Okay,
And I have no further questions.
okay. Does the board have any questions for this witness?
No.
Okay, then open it up to the audience, and then lastly would be redirect, right?
Everybody in the audience, I believe, is represented by.
We have nobody. Okay, so do we have anyone in the audience?
Except for maybe Mr. Gallagher.
No, who's not a part, right? Okay, all right. So then we have no one in the audience other than the representatives of other than people represented by the attorneys. So then we'll come back to redirect.
Mr. Bonick, Mr. Stevens asked you some questions about the ability to identify properties in the city to which the ordinance amendment 1304.04B could apply. Recall those questions?
I do, yes.
Is it possible to ascertain with any kind of exactitude all the properties in the city to which the zoning ordinance amendment could apply?
No.
Why is that?
There's a very large number of properties, and you would be required to go inside of each one of the buildings, ascertain the current land use, and interview the owner to confirm the land use.
And according to the ordinance amendment, zoning hearing board has discretion in terms of granting a special exception, correct?
They do, yes.
And with respect to 1304.04A, is it possible, as we sit here today, to identify all the properties in the city to which that zoning ordinance?
It is not.
With respect to the 8 properties in C3, and I'll show you, and looking at the 9 properties on page 2 of the appellant's exhibit 23. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, 9
Yes.
properties. Okay.
Yes.
Let's focus on appellant's 23. If we assume that all of these properties are potentially eligible for 1304.04B, and if in considering that in conjunction with the 8 properties in C1.
I'm sorry, Mr. So are we assuming the 8 and then the additional 9 on 823?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
For the purpose of this question, the potential eligibility of those 17 properties, does that affect your opinion as to whether the zoning ordinance amendment constitutes a violation?
Objection, that's leading to an ultimate opinion, an ultimate conclusion in the case. That's for this zoning hearing board to make a determination, not this expert.
Experts can testify.
He is not a lawyer. He is not a legal consultant to make a legal conclusion on spot zoning. That's inappropriate for an engineer to cast such an opinion.
He was admitted as an expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll listen to it and we'll take into account his expertise. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Question again, please.
If you were to look at the total 17 properties, the 9 properties in appellant's exhibit 23, 8 properties in city 1.
Just go.
The 9 properties on page 2 of appellant's 23, the 8 properties in city exhibit 1. Looking at those 17 properties, the fact that there are a multitude of properties to which the ordinance amendment could apply affect your opinion as to whether the ordinance amendment constitutes spot zoning?
Just note my objection to the extent that mischaracterizes the evidence of record and what this particular expert has testified to. There's been testimony about the 8 properties that he submitted. There's been testimony about the additional 9 properties that are in Exhibit 23. However, there's been further testimony with respect to the 8 to 140 properties, Mr. Bannock gave an estimate that
Okay.
he started investigating 15 of those properties. And half of them did meet eligibility requirements, and then just happened to stop. So
Okay.
the question mischaracterizes the testimony of record.
Delightful, it wasn't my question. I asked the question about 17 properties.
And that's mischaracterizes the evidence of record and is an improper question because it mischaracterizes
Well-
evidence of record.
I don't know that it does. He just said if it were just these 17,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
If it were, I mean, Mr. Stevens, we had so many hypotheticals with respect to Long becoming a street. I don't understand why he can't just ask him, if it were just 17, would that change your opinion? You're welcome to make an argument that the question is absolutely useless to us if in fact it should be more, right? Isn't that what you're just saying? Is the question is useless because you don't, because you.
That's why it should be asked, and that's why it should be
Well,
restricted.
but it's only because you think it's something more than 17, right? We have heard it could be 8, it could be 17, it could be 40, it could be 140, right? Doesn't the board have to weigh all of those items? And you could ask him if it were 140, would it affect his opinion, right?
And that's why I think it's a useless exercise and an
We'll take that into
improper
account.
and irrelevant question, and it
Okay.
mischaracterizes the evidence of record
But
and
it-
misconstrues that. And
Okay,
it
it's
creates a
overruled.
confusing record.
It's overruled, and we'll take the objection. We'll take it into account when we hear the answer.
Mr. Rock, you testified that it's possible those 8 properties in C1 could be eligible for the ordinance amendment, correct?
Yes.
And if we take those 8 properties and we just assume the eligibility of the 9 on page 2 of appellant's 23, so we have 17 properties.
Yes.
Does the fact that there could be a multitude of properties in the city to which the ordinance could affect your opinion as to whether the ordinance amendment constitutes spot zoning?
Just note my objections, same objections as
You know what, this is,
I'm
Hold on.
protecting the
Mr.
record.
Stevens, but you've objected to the
Fair
same
enough.
question.
I-
Stop, please.
I'm protecting the record in that was a new question. It was multiple
Was it?
questions. It was compound.
Okay.
And it for the reasons I set forth before, it mischaracterized evidence of record and also cast an improper legal conclusion opinion that an engineering expert is unqualified to provide.
But
And
he was,
therefore,
you didn't object
it's
when he was
improper.
qualified as an expert in zoning and land
I
development.
did object.
No, you didn't.
I-
No,
No, you
No
didn't.
way.
No,
No.
no. The
No.
record would reflect that. That's what he was asked to be qualified in.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah.
The record will speak for itself. I raised
He was-
objections
he was
and
qualified
narrowed
as a
that he was
zoning
to
engineer.
just to be testifying as far as engineering. I raised objections to
Okay.
casting opinions on the ambiguity of the zoning and to cast engineering opinions as far as the zoning ordinance. So those objections will speak for themselves. and they're
Okay.
on the record.
Well, I think we admitted him.
Yeah.
The board admitted him.
I think he did object, but I think the board.
Oh, okay.
We overruled.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. You objected, but he was offered for an expert in zoning and land development, and that's what the board admitted him as. And so the objection that he's an engineer and shouldn't, I don't know that one matters because you have to. There's the objection that he was admitted. You have the underlying objection that he shouldn't have been admitted to be an expert on zoning and land development, correct?
That objection exists, and I further
Right.
qualified it in a question. I said, "You're not a city planner, nor are you casting
Right.
opinions in city planning nor architecture."
Okay.
So I narrowed his scope of testimony to that of only engineering.
All right. So can you ask that question again and see what objection if there is one?
Mr. Bonnick. 8 properties in C1, 9 properties on page 2 of appellant's 23. Looking at those 17 properties, and assuming the eligibility of the 9 in appellant's 23. Looking at those 17 properties, the fact that there are a multitude of properties in the city to which the ordinance amendment could apply, affect your opinion as to whether the ordinance amendment constitutes spot zoning.
Just to protect the record,
Attorney Stevens.
I am
on.
objecting for the reasons I have said before.
All right. Okay, now answer the question. Overruled, same objection. Got it.
I'm just protecting the record.
Got it.
We
So
got it.
when this gets read back, there is no argument on their part that I have waived the objection.
We understand.
He hasn't waived the objection.
Yeah, we've got it. You have not waived that objection.
Everybody in the room understands you have not waived the objection.
Okay.
But let him
Good.
finish. Let him answer the question,
Hold on,
please.
hold on, everybody.
I'm glad we have that on the record. Thank you.
It does, yes. One of the considerations of spot zoning is would the subject ordinance only apply to a single property? These two exhibits would suggest that of the 17 properties, most, if not all of them, would also be impacted by that ordinance.
And let's go further. You've looked at the exhibit from generated by Ms. Heller about over 100 properties, perhaps being eligible for the zoning ordinance amendment at 1304.04B. Assuming those properties are accurate in the sense of being eligible for the zoning ordinance amendment, does that affect your opinion as to whether the ordinance amendment constitutes spot zoning?
Just note my objection. It mischaracterizes Ms. Heller's testimony. She said there was up to 140 properties.
I believe I said over 100.
Yes, it does. It provides further evidence that the sample group that would be impacted by the ordinance is in fact quite large.
And can you render opinion as to whether the ordinance is spot zoning?
Again, just note my
My
objection
opinion, it
for
is-
the reasons I have set forth before.
And I mean, just so we're clear from the beginning, this is a zoning proceeding and the rules of evidence are different. I mean, they're relaxed and we can use leeway. So, I mean,
Mhm.
but we understand what Mr. Bonnick, his background, his CV, we understand the objection. So,
The ordinance amendment at 1304.04B, have you reached a conclusion as to whether that's spot zoning?
It is not spot zoning.
Have all the opinions you've rendered today been rendered to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Have been, yes.
That's all I have.
okay.
That closes the questioning of Mr. Bonnick.
I have further
Close-
recross.
Okay. He gets an opportunity on those few
Yeah,
questions,
yeah.
right? Okay.
Yep. Mr. Bonnick, you mentioned just in your prior testimony that the sample ordinance in question is quite large. Can you explain that in more detail? What did you mean by that?
Referring to the various lists that have been provided for consideration, including the 8, the 9, and the list that came from Darlene Heller.
So I'm clear on the record. It includes your list of 8 properties, correct?
Yes,
It includes Exhibit 23, which is the 9 additional properties, correct?
yes,
And it includes Darlene Heller's testimony and submissions that there's perhaps anywhere from 8 to 140 properties that may be impacted by this zoning amendment, correct?
yes.
So that's quite a comprehensive and extensive amount of properties that are affected by this zoning amendment, correct?
Well, it certainly provides evidence that more than one property are impacted by the ordinance.
And
It does. But it
anywhere,
does not attempt to define how many properties are impacted by the ordinance. All I'm saying is that those 3 pieces of evidence provide confirming, supporting data to say it goes well beyond just the one property.
nothing further. Thank you.
Okay.
I have no other witnesses. I would just move my exhibits
Okay.
and then rest.
And I just want to make sure I moved the last few exhibits that I marked 49 and 50.
All right. So, well, 50 is not, because remember we said we're just leaving it as 2.
Just so it's marked as part of the record.
Okay.
Oh, no,
I mean, all you did was copy pages out of another one of your exhibits, right?
right.
With my exhibit, yeah.
Oh, out of the city's exhibit. Do we,
I mean, since there was a reference made in the record, just so the record's
All
not
right.
confusing, let's mark it.
so we won't admit C50 only because we're not verifying
I'm
what
not-
you've photocopied, right?
Just so it's marked.
But it's
so we
fine.
Have it as part of the record.
Or it's A50. Yeah, I'm sorry, I marked it as C. So it's A50 and A49. Are you objecting?
Aye.
Okay.
Attorney Preston, if he has any.
Well, yeah. So 849, the objection is it wasn't authenticated, but you asked all your questions about it by address anyway.
Right.
So I mean, I guess you could put someone on to authenticate the photograph, or are you?
Goes to what the panel was just referring to as far as you have leniency as far as accepting
Yeah.
the pictures of 204 East Market Street. Yeah. And I think it's part of the record, and the record will be much clearer if we have the photographs.
Do you want to, I mean, I don't know. I have no idea whether it is or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
The witness didn't.
It's not clear.
Yeah.
It's my old pediatrician's office. I have no idea what the address is.
Okay. All right. I mean, we'll admit it without, yeah, we'll admit it. I mean, to us, the questions were what was important, really. 204. That was 204.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's admitted. So 849 is admitted. 850 is not admitted, only because it's photocopies of another exhibit.
Yeah.
we don't want to have to verify. Because it's photocopies of C2?
C1.
C2 is a comprehensive plan.
That's what 50 was. Okay, all right. Perfect.
Mine were C1 through 50.
Okay. Do you have objections to C1 through 15, I think is the next question then?
Oh, no.
No? Okay, perfect. So C1 to C15 are admitted. You got that? Hope you kept a good list. Kidding you. I've been trying. Okay. All right. So then I think the next step would be Mr. Preston. Do you have any witnesses? Oh, you have your one exhibit. Yeah. Yeah. And the board accepted it for that purpose, understanding what Mr. Stevens' objection was. And that's I1 is this decision. Okay. For limited purpose of showing use changed. Right. That's admitted. To be clear, do you object if it's for that limited purpose?
I want to maintain my objection.
Okay,
I said
we'll
that
still
before.
admit it. I just wanted to see if you did. Okay. What? Yeah. All right. So, and you had no witnesses, Mr. Preston. Okay, and I think we've established there is no one in the audience who's not represented. Correct? Okay. So I believe,
Closing remarks.
well, but the schedule that we've established,
Oh,
what
that's
we go
right.
to next. So I think we're done
Yeah.
with the testimony. Okay.
You can reinforce what the schedule is, so I know
Yeah, so
exactly
that's what I
what-
want to do next. So I want to put on the, because it's changed, I want to put on the record again,
Right.
the following. I need all three council to acknowledge on the record, after I'm done with this schedule, that you waive the provisions for rendering decision under the MPC solely so we can issue a decision in accordance with the schedule I'm about to announce. It's going to be identical to last time, as long as Mr. Pfeiffer helps me with the dates again. So we're not changing the dates. So can you give me the date, which is 4 weeks from last Wednesday?
For Attorney Stevens to
Submit his findings and his memo of law,
That will be on the 5th of February. That is a Wednesday.
February 5. And then 2 weeks from that should be the 19th.
Correct.
Okay, so February 19th is for Mr. Deschler and Mr. Preston to put in their responses. So they get 2 weeks. And then 5 o'clock on the 26th, we're gonna have the opportunity for the three council to make statements. We are going to read these. Trust me, the board has done this before. Everybody is diligent. The board will have read all of those. We don't need anybody to rehash that. So we're proposing to give everybody up to 5 minutes to just kind of touch on something or respond to something, because you need to put it in that in the written materials. Okay? We're going to try to stick to that. Like I said, I promise you, all three of these board members will have thoroughly read everything that each of you submitted. We always do.
Can you just clarify that the memorandums of law should come to me? and
Okay,
I'll
yeah, I
distribute
will.
them?
And then the last thing would, yeah, and then the board will deliberate after that. But we're going to start at 5 because the board's going to have additional hearings afterwards. So this will help us, since we don't need witnesses showing up and that, it'll help us if we start at 5 for that. What you should do is email me your submissions and copy Mr. Pfeiffer because he will make sure each of the board members gets those in a timely fashion. And then lastly, you'll waive the provisions in the MPC, and I'd like each of you to acknowledge that on the record so that the decision can be issued 45 days from the 26th, because I think the board is committed to, we will have read those, we'll listen, and they will
Yes.
deliberate to a decision that night, barring the unforeseen. Okay,
City would waive the statutory requirement.
intervener.
Intervener waives the statutory requirement.
And the appellant's waive as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions about that? We have this at 5. An hour before, right? Okay. Okay. No questions? Perfect.
We close the hearing.
Very much.
It's a long and winding road and we're almost near the end. So